Good afternoon, friends. I would like to welcome you today to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker. It's the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer today, well, friendo, the answer is comics. The answer is always going to be comics. I grab a fistful of comic books from around. We look through them here on the screen for your pleasure. All right. If you like this show, if you like anything I do, the first thing I would like to do is direct you to the Patreon. You can find tons of stuff there to download, decades worth of my writing for your perusal. I've also been putting new shows on this channel devoted to talking about new comics. They're called Hey Tegan, What's in the Bag? It's where I come home from the comic book store and we look through my bag of comic books. So, check for those if you haven't seen them. Now, for today, let's get started with a look at Mr. Doctor Strange here. From issue 49 of Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme from 1993. I was a sometimes Doctor Strange buyer. I picked up Doctor Strange if I had a couple extra dollars at the store and it looked decent. I wasn't there for every issue because I think I had been burned by the later part of the Roy Thomas run on Doctor Strange. I actually liked the first part of the Roy Thomas run on Doctor Strange. The first part of the Roy Thomas run on Doctor Strange had Jackson Guice on it, which is why it's still worth flipping through. I didn't quite like so much what he got up to with Geoff Isherwood here. Now, Len Kaminski took over the book. So Len Kaminski is working with Isherwood here. And at this point, I think Isherwood had a pretty good handle on the character and on, the book's visual identity. He's definitely an artist who came up in the wake of, that school, the P. Craig Russell, Charles Vess school of illustrativeness that came up in the late 70s and the 80s. Turbo Touch 360. I remember looking at this ad when I was a kid and wondering, how is this supposed to work? No need to push, so you're putting less pressure on your thumb joint, but how is that actually doing anything? So the big push here, and I think why I bought the book for a few issues around this time, was they had a big storyline, Sorcerer Supreme No More, where they were messing with his powers. And you think, well, Doctor Strange doesn't have any powers. He just has magic skill. How can they mess with his magic skill? And what they did was he basically got into a conflict with his patron deities, the Vigilanti. And they took away much of the power that they had given him, leaving him much reduced. And this was, story-wise at least, the explanation for why he went running with the Secret Defenders around this time, because suddenly he wasn't anywhere near as powerful as he was, and he had to, do things like draft super teams full of assistants to help him. And to be fair, I've always thought the Secret Defenders was actually a really great concept. Probably the execution wasn't to people's liking at the time, but the idea of Doctor Strange just putting together a random team of people who maybe he doesn't even know why, but the cards are telling him that this combination of characters is needed for this mission. That's actually a really good hook for a book. And if you go back, Secret Defenders, at least the first few storylines are actually kind of fun, because it's just about taking a completely random set of characters and watching them bounce off each other for a couple issues at a time, with Doctor Strange as sort of the ringleader. And it definitely worked with the Defenders concept a lot more than I was expecting, simply because it's part of the Defenders DNA that at least one or more members of the team really doesn't want to be there at any given time. And that concept was rendered rather gorgeously by just Doctor Strange having a tarot deck that told him who to draft, regardless of whether or not he even wanted to work with them, because he ended up using the Punisher on one of the missions. It was the 90s. Of course, he was going to use the Punisher on one of his missions, but that's a nice page right there. I had the Spider-Man and the X-Men game. That was another absurdly difficult game. Couldn't get past I know it's an old story with me. Couldn't get past the level. I couldn't get past the first character levels for any of these. And I played this game for hours and hours and hours, and it was just too hard. It was too hard for me. I don't think I ever played the NES one. And I also don't think I ever saw the Game Boy one. Free comics for Christmas. Bet there's a catch. So he's having to fight some kind of demons or something with the Eye of Agamotto. It's a cool spatter effect they have. The eyes effect there. He gets eaten by a monster. So yeah, I think that means Len Kaminski was writing Doctor Strange at the same time he was writing Iron Man, and they never even did a crossover, which, low-hanging fruit right there. I don't think there's ever been a really solid Doctor Strange Iron Man crossover. Just those two characters. When I think that, I think of, I think of Brian Michael Bendis's Mustache Brothers page, which, if you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a very memorable passage. Not for good reasons. So yeah, the gimmick here is he's being drafted by Stephen Strange of Earth. By the protocols of pan-cyclical conflict, you are hereby conscripted for a period of not more than... oh yes, and here's what's happening is basically all of every creature who he's ever taken energy from, any kind of boon, because that's all he does. His spells invoke various deities, and basically there's a war, and all of these guys, this is Watum, this is Icon with a K, Ikonn. Here's Kitterak, although Kitterak has appeared differently in certain X-Men comics when he's appeared. I guess they just, he's a pan-dimensional magical entity, so he can basically look how he wants. It's not really too bad on its own. Yeah, see, Secret Defenders. Due to popular demand, the Defenders return. Man, someone's tongue was planted firmly in cheek for that one. This time with a rotating team that includes Ghost Rider, Darkhawk, Gambit, Wolverine, Spidey, Cable, and more. You see why they made a push with this one in 1993. But straight up, that is a good hook for a book, straight up. The right writer could cook with it. They could. Al Ewing used the Secret Defenders as the rationale for his second Defenders story. His first Defenders story was a more conventional Defenders story with the classic lineup. The next bit had more of a random configuration with the help of the tarot cards, because the Secret Defenders, Doctor Strange uses an aid, usually cards, to help him divine his team. Yeah, straight up. Marvel, if you're listening, I'll write Secret Defenders for you. Oh, hell yeah. Secret Defenders can cross over into anything. It can have whatever characters it needs to. The Seraphim. No, the mortal is mine. So everyone's just going after Strange because they know he's powerful. They know Doctor Strange is an extraordinarily powerful human wizard, and he's asked for their help, invoked their aid at so many times over the years. that they all feel entitled to draft him for this war. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, he's wearing the Eye of Agamotto. It's the Vigilanti who own the biggest chunk of his hide, and they know it, so they're here. They're here for him. Like, you can escape Watum, but you can't escape these guys. These guys are your three main patrons in the world of magic. Although Kitterak is quite powerful as well. But he's always been a bit more wary about Kitterak, because if you've read any of the X-Men stories dealing with Kitterak, he is just an extra dimensional creature of chaos and war. So we got Dragon Quest, one of TSR's attempts at a more board game entry version, a more board game-esque entry-level version of D&D. I don't know if they still do anything like Dragon Quest. My understanding is that they're having a hell of a time monetizing that brand, which I could have told you. TSR was able to make a lot of money when they didn't have anywhere near as much overhead as Hasbro. Kind of weird how that works. TSR used to guarantee like a 1 or 2 page ad buy every month at Marvel Comics for like a decade. And now nothing. So yeah, everyone, even these like no account, punch drunk schmoes like the Faultine, Ragador, Voltor, Satanish, Danak. When was the last time you saw Danak? Munipur? Enough, I am no one's servant. Be they man or God, I renounce you all. So basically, he recites this magic spell called the Emancipation Incantation. Hey, I didn't write it. Len Kaminski's the one you want to talk to. But basically, he's saying, like, look, this is the only logical thing I can do here. You want me to go fight in this war? All of you are presenting more or less an equal claim. I can't fight for all of you, so I have to choose to fight for none of you. So we're done. I'm cutting ties. And they're like, all right, never, ever call upon any of us for any reason again. You're out of here. Outcast. So he returns to Earth, and he's basically just a heap, because he has been told what for. We'll come back for that. East Coast Comics ad. And and then he gets home, and Clea shows up. She's like, oh, hey, I hope nothing's going wrong with you this week, because guess who's back? Back again. Dormammu's back. Tell a friend. And he's got 6 arms, and I don't think he ever had 6 arms again before or since. But it worked for this. And I think issue 50 is sort of a soft launch of the Defenders again, because it's an actual, I think, Namor, Surfer, Hulk Defenders reunion, I want to say. At least 2 out of those 3 other characters. And then the secret Defenders lineup starts the same month in its own book, unrelated. And man, they need to do an omnibus of these Marvel Year in Review books. I think they did 5, I want to say, all told. The first 2 were a little bit less funny. The last 3 were more funny. They could get a good book out of them. Nobody laughs at Marvel like Marvel does. Well, I guess. My goodness. Look at that subscription form. Nightbreed had its own monthly comic. The Clive Barker movie. Nomad, Pendragon, Darkhold. That, I want to say, maybe that lasted barely a year. I loved it too, but Fish Police. I do not think Fish Police their printing of Fish Police, I do not believe lasted a year. It wasn't new Fish Police stories. It was just the old Fish Police with a Marvel logo slapped on it. Because everyone just could not get enough of the Fish Police back in 93. Speaking of things people couldn't get enough of, the Wayne's World VCR board game. The VCR board game. That's 1993 for you. The critics are hooked. So the Hook video game, which uses actual cartoon characters, nothing like the movie. They're saying that the Hook video game got good reviews. That strikes me as rather snide in this instance. All right, I said I'd go back. Because I love these old bullpen pages. Love them. They're still running the Rick Parker cartoons here, with Tom DeFalco officiating a group wedding. Stan Soapbox. Oh, God. He's talking about the Marvel UK. Hi, heroes. What good's a soapbox if it isn't used to tell you things you don't know? I'll bet few of you are aware that Mighty Marvel's sensational sister company across the sea, Marvel Comics UK, UK standing for United Kingdom, of course, has taken the once staid British populace by storm with the creation of a pulse-pounding plethora of startling new superheroes featured in England's own cosmic collection of costume crusaders, the now legendary bestseller Overkill. Now, whatever intern was responsible, and we know, I'm not talking tales out of school, for decades it was pretty standard, anything that was a Stan Soapbox was written by the office, by someone in the office, and, run by, an editor. Because, Stan Lee has just been the company's character in this position as a hype man for that long. And you hear stories about, any Stan Lee introduction you read from the last 20, 30, I don't know, decades of the man's life, were the deal was you'd contact Stan Lee to ask him to write something, and if he said yes, you would write it as Stan, and then they'd look it over, and that was more or less how the game was played. So, they're talking about wedding bells. One editor who is solo no longer is assistant editor Evan Skolnick, who this past July said I do to his own British import, Lynn White. Evan's former boss, Fabian Nisi, is a writer of Nomad. Last month gave up his life of wandering as he settled down and married his longtime sweetheart, Tracy Lee. It only took 12 years for Fabian to make that decision. Well, he is known for his long runs. Fabe's brother Mariano of the promotions department also has done some writing himself through a blowout bachelor party for Fabulous Fabe, which featured a special mega entertaining slideshow of the life and times of Fabian. Fabian's Nomad editor, Glenn Helium Hurdling, seems to have found religion. Not only is he writing Paragon for our new religious comics line, but he also was made an honest man last month by his new bride, Laura Eckert. There were at least a year or so when Marvel tried to do business with, I can't even remember the name of the company. Marvel had a line of explicitly Christian comics. This Paragon character was, I think, the lead character and maybe only character. But they did a few, books about the life of Jesus during this period, which, as far as oddball Marvel stuff goes, they put good creators on their religious books. Definitely in the 80s, they did a Life of Francis of Assisi. That's a giant-sized book by John Buscema. Absolutely gorgeous. You know, John Buscema is on good behavior for that one. Definitely worth tracking down. I paid a few bucks for it, for a nice copy of it. We are going to read it on the TikTok one of these days, but it's going to have to wait till I remember to look up St. Francis's Day, and then we'll do it then, because it is a gorgeous book. Mark Grunwald, who also slipped the quantum band around the finger of his new bride, Catherine Schuler, last month. Performing at Mark's wedding was Wolverine writer Larry Hama's band, The Chaotix. Mark and Catherine's wedding song was One More Kiss from the movie Blade Runner. Your wedding dance is from the themed Blade Runner. That's a special type of person. Now, that's interesting to hear about The Chaotix, because literally just the other day I was reading DC's obituary page for Mark Bright, and Larry Hama was the first encomium they had on that page, and he was talking about playing with Mark Bright, who was a bass player. Larry Hama played rhythm guitar, and they apparently played together on The Chaotix for decades, because it was still a going thing when Mark Bright died, apparently. So yeah, that is a long-running outfit. That is who you want to get to play your wedding, although I don't know if they'll be doing weddings anymore. Straight up, I don't believe in throwing a big party when you get married. But if I did ever need a wedding band, I would try to get these guys. Rick Parker, who drew this cartoon, still basking in the success of his best-selling book with Barry Dudder. Everything I Need to Know I Learned from Television. I don't remember that at all. Also walked down the aisle last month with Barbie writer Lisa Truciani at a ceremony in Falmouth, Maine. Sadly, Pinhead of the Cenobites doesn't do weddings either. Pinhead's boss, Hellraiser editor Marcus McLaurin, is used to seeing souls torn apart in the pages of that mag. But Marcus McLaurin will take part in the joining of two souls when he exchanges vows with his intended Janet Pays next month. Marcus proposed to Janet on the Sky Ride at Disney World. Surely the wedding will be an epic event, though hopefully not a harrowing one. Finally, we come to Hulk editor Bobby Chase, whose gamma-irradiated nuptials will be taking place next June. Craig Kernash of the direct sales department proposed to Bobby at the top of a mountain in St. Martin while the two were on vacation. Well, isn't that wonderful? All right. All right, here's something I picked up a while back. Haven't really had a chance to go through it yet. This DC Pride Through the Years, 80 thrilling pages in full color reprints. I think there's one new story in here, an Alan Scott story. So this has various stories that have been important to queer representation in the line over the years, starting off with an issue of The Flash from the William Messner-Loebs, Greg LaRoque run, an issue of the Detective Comics from the Batwoman series by Greg Rucka and J.H. Williams, which these two runs right here, the Messner-Loebs run of Flash and the first run of Batwoman stories, you should have those already. Those are highly recommended. Supergirl 19, that one I don't think I've read, from the Steve Orlando and Vita Ayala. Supergirl, Jamal Campbell, artist. And the new story is the Alan Scott story by Tim Sheridan, Cyan Tormey. All right, so we got 2 pages from Benjamin LeClaire, DC Archivist. This was last year's special. They put out another reprint special this year, and I didn't pick it up because I had I had the stuff in it. I think there's a couple other things in it that I didn't have, but I had most of it. So maybe if I see it in a bin or something at some point. But this is, like I say, you need to be aware of the Messner-Loebs Flash run. I know the Mark Waid run is the run that everyone likes. It's the one that everyone paid attention to, and it brought people back to the character. But And I'm sure, to be completely fair, I'm absolutely certain Mark Waid would give credit to the fact that his, extraordinarily well-received, well-defined version of Wally West was inherited from Messner-Loebs, because this was the character who Messner-Loebs inherited from Mike Baron, after Mike Baron did a year that, it's a weird year in hindsight. I'm not going to say it's a bad year, and it definitely has its fans, but it goes in a completely different direction than any run of Flash, and on purpose. That's exactly what it's trying to do, is be a decidedly different take on the Flash. Lasts about a year, and then I'm not going to say that Messner-Loebs comes in and reverts the book back to the way it had been, because that's explicitly not what he does. He takes the character that he inherits from Mike Baron, Wally West, who was actually, to be fair, going into the Mike Baron run out of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Wally West was already established as kind of standoffish. If you've read, and I know I want to talk about the Titans, but I know what happens in the Titans, and his arc in that book is kind of growing out of love with that friend group and realizing he doesn't really need to be around the Titans all the time. And so the character that we meet in 1986 or 87, he's sort of at loose ends, even though he wouldn't probably put it that way. And the master plot of Messner-Loebs' run of The Flash over the course of his take on the character is Wally West learning to re-engage with the human race, coming to grips with his family, which doesn't mean making up with his family. He has a contested relationship with both of his parents. There's no point that I remember, at least when Messner-Loebs or Waid is writing it, where Wally West makes up with his dad. It just doesn't happen, because his dad is a schmuck. His dad was terrible. His dad was literally a spy. And he doesn't even really like his mother either, but for completely different reasons. And they were very realistic relationships. And that's the point of this run of the character, is Wally West basically growing up and realizing, I'm not going to have a good relationship. I'm not really going to choose to have any relationship with my dad, and I'm okay with that because I don't like him. I'm going to still have a relationship with my mother, even though we're not ever really going to see eye to eye, but we've both been through a lot. I thought that was realistically portrayed as well. And another thing is his relationship with the Pied Piper, who starts out as a rogue and ends up being one of his, I don't know if you'd say he was his best friend, but one of his very best friends. And he has to deal with, one of his, they have the exact same color hair. That's, for some reason, that's really striking me as weird. He has to deal with one of his best friends coming out to him, and how he deals with that. And I think how it's dealt with in this book by William Messner-Loebs is one of the most realistic treatments of that subject matter that I've ever seen in comics, because his first reaction is, oh yeah, you're my friend. Of course it doesn't bother me. But at the same time, it still kind of freaks him out. And there's no way around that. And it's a very human portrayal of real situations that lots of people have found themselves in. And that's why I think that this version of the character, and like I said, the version that Mark Waid took over, that was defined so well in the years, by three successive writers, Baron, Messner-Loebs, and Waid, who really went out of their way to really nail what this guy could be. And that is why people were so unhappy when they decided to just throw him over and bring back the old guy. Because the old guy, he never had the angst to start with. They gave him angst later, and that's why this the later Barry Allen stories are just kind of odd. And they went out of their way to sell us this guy, and then they decided, oh, we're not going to sell you that guy anymore. And when they brought Barry Allen back, they realized that, oh, wait a minute. Barry Allen didn't really have anything. We have to give him all this artificial angst that he didn't used to have. We're going to give him this murder plot line with his mother, when the whole point of Barry Allen was that he didn't have angst. He got into being a superhero because he read about superheroes as a kid. That's like the point. And I didn't even hate the TV show, even though the TV show was wrapped around that whole plot thing. But I did not enjoy a single Barry Allen story, really, since they brought him back. So yeah, it's the type of story that really adds up if you sit down and read it all over a short period of time. And you can see he was playing the long game with characterization for all these characters. And I just can't say enough nice things, because you may have already read the Wade run. And the Barron run, like I say, it's got Jackson Guy's art. It's at least worth looking at for that reason. And it's kind of interesting. It's not like any other Flash. But those three writers really put the work in to sell Wally West. And, this story with the Pied Piper was a big part of that. A big part of why, people had a lot of affection for this version of the character. Now, as I was saying, the Batwoman run, the original run of Batwoman stories in Detective Comics, some of DC's best comics of the 21st century. You should already have this somewhere, either in the original issue, or in an omnibus, or in a trade, or maybe you got it out of the library, but please, please read these. There's a reason why people talk about J.H. Williams the way they do, because he just doesn't miss. And this run right here, the run that really sold the new Batwoman, after there hadn't been a Batwoman for decades. There was no law that there had to be a Batwoman. So them deciding that they were going to launch a new Batwoman, she could very easily have fallen flat. She did not fall flat. She was a hit, and she is still around, and they've still pretty much, I'm sure they gussy it up some, but they've still pretty much kept that costume, that really striking black and red, to go with the hair there. Can't be beat. You definitely, if you don't have these, you need to go get them. Just go get them. And this is her relationship with Maggie Sawyer, which is Maggie Sawyer's big in to the drama of the Bat family. Although, one of the reasons why this character hit the way she did, when she did, everything I just said, but there's also the fact that she was slightly removed from the Batman drama. She's not one of Bruce Wayne's intimate acquaintances. They're not very close, despite being related. In fact, probably because they're related, they're just not people who talk to each other very much. And their interaction you can see here. And she definitely doesn't want him up in her business. And she's actually formidable enough because she comes from a completely different background. She's ex-military. And she's also got an operation of some size behind her. So he's aware by the first time he sees her. I don't think this is their first meeting. Maybe it is. But he's already aware of all this by the time he meets her, and he knows that he's not going to be able to pry her from Gotham if she doesn't want to be pried, because she knows how to fight. Even down to the the bit that I love. She puts on this long, flowing wig, which everyone thinks is a total liability, but it's actually perfect for fighting because everyone goes to grab the hair and they grab the wig. You know, just a slight different approach to the idea of being a bad vigilante from someone who was definitely, 100% military, and then just became oh man, and just became completely disillusioned with that way of life, with that way of being, but still has that training, deep in their bones. And she's got her own milieu with her sister, I think this is. I want to say this is her sister. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Stuff and nonsense. The idea of having your sentence first. Whatever. And see, there you go. There's a difference right there. She's a bad person who will straight up use a gun because she knows how to use a gun. All right, and so like I say, I think this issue of Supergirl came out, what does that say? 19. This came out during my sabbatical when I wasn't even reading the books I wanted to read, let alone reading anything indiscriminately. So, Jamal Campbell, I think he's still doing Superman. He draws a great Superman, and he draws a great Supergirl, too. He clearly has an affection for the character and that mythos. Man, this looks nice. This is a nice looking book. Excellent expression, both physical, body language and facial expression. He's really good at conveying character that way through body language. I mean, that's the name of the game right there. And he draws a mean Supergirl. I think Supergirl should be like 20% meaner than Superman. I'm okay with that. That's the Supergirl I grew up with, who maybe doesn't have quite as much patience, quite as much. That's maybe not the pure Linda Lee and Smallville original Supergirl, but I didn't even mind it when she had the Red Lantern ring. I thought that was fun because that version of Supergirl did have a lot of reasons to be angry. So that was, I thought, a fun set of stories. It wasn't going to last forever, but I thought it was fun. Oh, there it is. There it is. That's just what I was saying. I look human, but I'm not. When I first got to Earth, I didn't know the culture, the language. People were scared of me, hated me too. I was so angry, so confused, but that wasn't me. That was who they were afraid I could be. But it was fun. It was fun because I love the Red Lanterns. I've said it before. The Red Lantern run by Milligan and Benez is kind of a buried treasure. Really weird comic books. So I guess I don't even know what the Pride milestone in this one is. At some point I'll go back and I'll read it. So she's got a character friend who she needs to be accepting of in some way. There we go. You just accepted me, no questions. I'm glad I was wrong. There we go. Nice looking comic book, though, I will say. This Jamal Campbell fellow knows how to draw a comic book. I picked up a few issues of the recent Superman relaunch. I think only the first few because it was good, but also I can't buy everything. I do pay for the DC online. I can go and catch up at any time I want. So. This is the Alan Scott character who was pulled out of the closet a couple years ago. Well over 10 years ago. And then not without some controversy because he was established and married. But it's not like people in that generation didn't live their whole lives in marriages despite, secrets like that. So, as far as after the fact revelations go, it worked. I don't think it was quite as clean as the Iceman Iceman coming out, it felt like they had been building to that for decades. If you go back and read all the Iceman stories, but they've gone back and they've filled in some of the blanks on Alan Scott. Oh, to be continued in the Alan Scott Green Lantern. Now the funny thing is, Geoff Johns maybe doesn't want to turn in the scripts for his actual JSA book that they gave him, but it seems like the spin-off miniseries, they had an Alan Scott Green Lantern one, they had a Sandman, Golden Age Sandman one, and a Flash, Jay Garrick one. I think people received those fairly well. I saw people saying good things about them, at least. What else we got here? All right, we haven't pandered yet this episode, so let's look at an issue of Wolverine from the late 90s. Not just any Wolverine, friend. This is the Erik Larsen Wolverine with Jeff Matsuda, Steve Scott, Yancey Labatt. Oh, 3 people on pencils and 3 people on inks. That's the wonders of late 90s Marvel. So anyway, as the cover tells us, and as the first page promises, this has got Wolverine versus Galactus. Now you might be thinking, that doesn't sound like much of a fight, and that's kind of the point. A little bit like, the proverbial Bambi versus Godzilla matchup. Basically, this storyline is that Wolverine ends up getting involved in space stuff on his own. So he gets dragged out to space without having any of the other X-Men or any Avengers to help, just him on his own. I think he gets mixed up in something the Collector's doing. And him on his own, he doesn't have a lot of resources out in space. He just doesn't. And that's kind of what this story is about. Throwing Wolverine out into the middle of the universe where he just has to depend on his wits to survive, because he can do nothing against Galactus but pray. And so there you go. There's the big man, Big G himself, little W. And on his own, without even Professor X or anyone else, Galactus has no reason to talk to Wolverine about anything. Now, this run was a little bit controversial at the time. Not necessarily because I think maybe some people had a problem with just, putting Wolverine up against Galactus. But I thought the run was trying to do something different, and it actually had a point, which was to show Wolverine up against hard limitations that just aren't usually present in Wolverine stories. You don't usually have to worry about the fact that Wolverine is basically the weakest person, like in this entire 2-page spread, because he's just filled with all these aliens who are escaping from the Collector's habitat and Galactus. And he's this little 5'0" Canadian guy who's got bone claws, and he's nothing in this scenario. He has to survive. That is interesting. I see exactly where Erik Larsen was coming from. That is a great hook for a Wolverine story. It's different. It's not something you're going to do every day, but it's fun. It's like, how is Wolverine going to get out of this one? I don't think people responded to it all that well, simply because, people want the same thing. Oh, wow. Futurama from the creator of The Simpsons, a new series coming Sunday, March 28th. Wow. So this is 1999. Yeah, 25 years. Futurama's 25 years. You know how long we waited for a Simpsons spinoff, and this wasn't really a Simpsons spinoff, but it was another Matt Groening joint. And now it's 25 years old. And boy, they should have stayed with the first 4 seasons. The first 4 seasons are perfect. And maybe they could have made more at the time. And I'm not saying that the returns haven't been decent, because I've seen all the returns. But man, those first 4 were perfect as it was. All right. Oh, wow. There you go. They just announced a big return for these guys, the Marvel vs. Capcom franchise. We won't give up a fight. Even now, the resistance begins. But that's crazy. Attacking that overground Cupid doll head-on won't do you a blasted thing, except get you killed a little faster. And if I recall correctly, Erik Larsen was rather incensed because he was not a good fit with Geoff Matsuda. Now, I wasn't particularly a Geoff Matsuda fan. Geoff Matsuda, he did a lot of work on like X Factor, which I thought was abominable. Not his fault. He was, bringing in some of what Joe Mad had been doing, the manga and anime influence, smuggling it into the mainstream. And I could not have guessed just how big Geoff Matsuda would get, because Geoff Matsuda, he went to Hollywood, and it turns out that his style was actually quite applicable to Hollywood, and I quite like the work he did for the first Batman, the first post-Batman the Animated Series Batman show, The Batman, which, took some missteps and was basically trying to just do everything that the animated series had done differently. Everywhere that show had zagged towards a more classical or, comic book based interpretation of certain characters, they went completely different. So that's why you had, Juggalo Joker in that one, and Batman fought Dracula in that incarnation as well. So he hooks up with the Starjammers, and that makes sense. That's who he's going to, that's basically the only people he's going to know to call. And so it's the Collector's house, his planet, that's about to get eaten by Galactus. And on his own, the Collector, he's powerful, but there's nothing he can do on his own against Galactus. All together, if like 5 or 6 or 7 elders get together, then they can make a dent in Galactus. But on their own, they're really not of any consequence to him. And this has been covered, actually, ad nauseum. Steve Englehart, during his run of Silver Surfer, he had a storyline where the elders got together to roll Galactus, basically. They were using the soul gems back when they were soul gems, and they didn't know how to use them in unison. They were just using them to power, I think, just a gun, a device to kill Galactus, because they weren't smart enough to just put them all in a big glove. Look at him. Joker's so flaming engrossed and set in shop, he's not even paying attention to what's going on down here. Well, of course he's not paying attention to what's going on down there. He doesn't care if people get away. He's pretty consistent about that. You can run away from Galactus and he'll leave you be. That is a consistent. He's not even necessarily vindictive in any way unless you try to mess with him, in which case he'll do the Shrakatum and Shirak, zappies. Ugh. And we've seen this ad before, I think. This does not make me want to watch this Disney Channel original movie. Does not. So whoever this woman is, I don't remember who this character is. She's trying to have some sort of psychic whammy on Galactus. I'm guessing she's going to be zapped. For a second there, it looked like Arya had a lock on the big guy, but now it looks like both she and Torgo are out for the count. So he's hanging around with this guy named Torgo, who's a robot who shows up in the very last home stretch of the Lee and Kirby Fantastic Four. He's basically just a bruiser who fights the Thing, and he fights Wolverine in this run. See, Erik Larsen was trying to have fun here, but he did not get along, I don't think, with Geoff Matsuda. And he complained in the press that the pencilers weren't writing drawing what he was writing for them, which, historically speaking, we must all recognize was a very, very, very rich turnaround there. I'm sure it was frustrating. And I'm sure it was also frustrating when you did it to Kupperberg on the Doom Patrol. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder if anyone has these textbooks online, the correspondence courses from the Kubert School. Might be interesting to see those texts. A course book, a giant 11 by 17 spiral-bound hardcover, full-color publication. Now, I don't know if they still have this correspondence course, but I also don't think they've ever tried to sell this independently, which if they had, just a Comics 101 from the Kubert School could probably sell a zillion copies. Not that I'm trying to give that idea away, mind you. So, yeah, they basically have to get out of town because there's nothing they can do in this instance. Even as the Starjammer pulls away from it, Wolverine can still see a burning bright molten red in the distance. For a moment, it's almost beautiful in a horrific kind of way. And they're on their way home. So this is the end of the story. And, oh, he's got a date with Carol Danvers. Of course he does. I mean, he spent, if you go back and read the tail end of the Claremont run, he spends a surprisingly large amount of that time pining over Carol Danvers in a way that has not necessarily been picked up on by subsequent writers. I mean, can I see it? Yes. TNN, Roller Jam. I don't remember ever catching that. That would have been fun. So, next issue. Hear ye, hear ye. For all those that have longed awaited the return of Lionel Francis Yu, wait no longer. The spectacular artist is back with Wolverine 139. And you get some preview pages here. Oh, those look nice. Calvin Klein. Calvin Klein put a lot of money on Marvel for like two years, 99 and 2000. I think they were out after that. Man, look at that. Pretty soon after this, they're going to get rid of the subscription ad altogether. I wonder if they gave up on it. I wonder if they tried to go back to that kind of direct mail, if it would reap any rewards for them. There was a bullpens page, wasn't there? Oh, yeah. Look at this. 5 books this week. Admittedly, that seems a little on the small side for Marvel. X-Force is up to 90. We're still on the tail end of the John Francis Moore and Jimmy Chung run. We've looked at some Jimmy Chung X-Force. We might look at some more Jimmy Chung X-Force at some point. Oh, yeah, I was going to find the Jimmy Chung Maverick to bring in. I keep forgetting that when I don't go up to the storage locker that often. Oh, and this is they did a 3-issue artistic fill-in on the Avengers with Jerry Ordway. I love these comics. It's just Jerry Ordway puttering around with the Avengers for 3 issues, but I think the sun rises and sets on Jerry Ordway, so I'm down with that. This volume of Nova. Erik Larsen was really excited about this because he was a huge Nova fan. He just did a bunch of interviews talking about how excited he was to be writing Nova, and it lasted 7 issues. Slingers, this lasted not that much longer, but I think it had a small following. Had some crisscross art. Spider-Man the Manga by Ryuichi Ikegami. I wonder, is that stuff still in print? Should still be in print if it isn't. That seems like something they could easily do a new omnibus of, and that would not be necessarily out of hand. Oh, here's more weddings. Joe Quesada and his beautiful fiancée, managing editor Nancy Dikesian, set to be married on March 13th in Miami, Florida. Miami? I guess someone's got to get married in Miami. That's the same day that senior cover coordinator Johnny Green will cap off his almost decade-long courtship with nurse Gloria Solomon. Bullpen veteran Tim Smith marrying Sylvia Rupani Smith on November 1st. All right, and they're advertising the Black Widow book that Devin Grayson is doing with J.G. Jones. I have secured a copy of the second issue of this, so we will be covering this on the TikTok at some point. I'm excited about that because I like these comics. I enjoyed them at the time, and I'm looking forward to revisiting them. Oh, and Wolverine Punisher Revelation. This was the second of the Angel Punisher stories they did, and it's a Pat Lee joint, so it's going to be interesting. And Stan Soapbox has devolved down into answering reader questions at this point, but well, we made it through 3 comics, but one of those comics was super big, so that makes sense. What else is there? I'm putting up shows on this channel where I talk about new comics. They're called Hey Tegan, What's in the Bag? Check them out if you want to see me basically doing this whole shtick. I'm trying to talk for a shorter amount of time, although am I doing a good job at that? No. My feel was that there was a market for a show about new comics, but they're not doing any better or worse than these videos either. They seem to get the exact same numbers, so check it out. I'm having fun doing them, at the very least. Check out the Patreon. I got tons of stuff to download there. If you like any of what I do, any of my videos on any of these platforms, that's where I would send you to check out. Daily comic book reviews posted on TikTok and Instagram. I'm doing Savage Tales, the Marvel magazine from the 1980s. That's every Wednesday this summer. We just finished looking at Earth X, the whole run. You can go back from the very beginning, from the preview issue they published in a Wizard. We spent 3.5 months reading that story. It's an excellent story. I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend you watch my videos on it. What else? I got a podcast with Claire Napier. It's called Udder Madness. We talk about Top Cow comics. We talk about Witchblade, The Darkness, Mark Silvestri, all that good stuff. We will be doing a special show for the new volume of Witchblade that's coming out here sometime in the coming month. So look forward to that. What else is there? I should have something at the Comics Journal at some point. I have years and years and years and years of back articles there, reviews and columns that you can go back and read at your leisure. Stuff that isn't available through the Patreon because it's up at the Journal. I've been writing for the Journal for a very long time. A very long time. I don't like to think about that. If the years that I've been writing at the Journal were a person, that person would almost be old enough to rent a car. Oh my goodness. And they still pay the same. They still pay the exact same. Have a wonderful day, folks. I will see you around. Please be kind to yourself, be kind to the world, be kind to animals, be kind to small children. Be good and do good and all that good stuff. Have a wonderful day.